Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Chris Torrence over at Optym. Appreciate everybody joining us for another episode of our semi-related podcast. And on today's episode, we have a very special guest. It should be a name many folks recognize throughout the industry. And let's spare no time in introducing our next guest, Spencer Tenney from the Tenney Group. So, Spencer, thanks for taking a little time out of your schedule to chat today.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, Spencer, I think, again, I don't know if you and I have ever crossed paths, and I've been in this space for 25, I don't know, embarrassed to say probably, but know you've got some time in industry as well. I want to say we've crossed paths several times, but this may be the most time we've ever got together virtually. So for anyone that maybe isn't fully aware of you or Tenney Group, I always like to do just a little quick intro about yourself and maybe the organization over at Tenney, just to give the audience a little more color and context into you and your team.
Well, I've been avoiding you for 25 years, Chris.
It
So,
was intentional. There he goes. The truth comes out.
because you're relentless. So, my family's been doing advisory, business sales and acquisitions in this space exclusively since 1973. And so, just long attachment, love for this industry and the people in it. And our firm, Tenney Group, we're unique. We, like I said, we specialize exclusively advising on deals. Most of the folks that we serve highly underserved marketing business owners at 20 million to 300 million in annual revenue, major complex problems around transacting and issues, and that's where our expertise is. They're very sophisticated in their size, but maybe not quite large enough to attract the sophistication of a large global premier investment bank. And that's where we come in. We bring very interesting specialized expertise and unique resources to help both buyers and sellers create unique outcomes that close to.
Well, Spencer, was it just a natural progression from you post collegiate years to kind of go into the business, or was there a few steps along the way, and did you just kind of take after those before you and say, this sounds intriguing enough for me to kind of make a career out of it?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. I was at a meeting with a client last night. We're having dinner, and he was asking about my road, which I call the broken road. So, like a lot of folks that come up in a family business is very resistant to kind of not doing my own path. I just kind of wanted to do my own thing. But what's interesting is that when you get exposure at a young age to something as significant as literally the largest financial event of someone's lifetime, and there's someone who is literally living out the American dream, and then watching my dad play an influential role of help them kind of get to the finish line and experience all the fruits of that labor and sacrifice. It's kind of it's an addicting thing once you get exposed to that. But still, I had to learn the hard way. I did some healthcare consulting. I was a songwriter, lived in Gypsum life in Nashville, Tennessee for a bit. And,
You're in the right place. Yeah.
So I had a lot of fun, but ultimately, after experiencing variety of different things and different work fields, just nothing even came close to being a part of something as special as helping people create value through acquisitions and then ultimately realizing that value through an exit. So that's why I continue to do this. Ultimately bought the business from my dad in 2018, and it's been a fantastic experience of bringing on more talent, people a lot smarter than me, and going to do really important work that matters. I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I know a lot of topic today will be around M&A, and I think there's probably, if anyone has that level of expertise, I think that's why we specifically wanted to get you on the show. We talk about a wide array of various topics, and for me personally, Spencer, I've been kind of on the receiving end of this tech startup, the freight tech, and at least the last 10 years or so. So always, I've gotten to know the venture game pretty well, understand private markets. Something I think a lot of people in industry, like, they see the headlines, right? But they rarely understand just what goes into M&A activity. And I think we'd be the first to say, right, our industry traditionally hasn't been the most attractive, at least for folks outside, right? So you think of M&A, not exactly a foreign term for a lot of folks, but when you think about it, the use cases and just the significance it's had in trucking, and I would say, again, the pandemic years certainly put supply chain, logistics, trucking, et cetera, in the spotlight for a myriad of reasons. But we also saw, probably in my history, that, my career wise, that's I don't know that I've seen a frenzy quite like that, where, some of the startups I were at were getting, these 20x valuations. And I remember one company had like 11 term sheets from tier ones out in Silicon Valley, like in an hour. And it just was like, it blew
Yeah.
my mind on just how much activity. Fast forward, right? I think we want to get into some of that today. I know earlier I looked at the 2023 report that Tenney Group put out. And again, that's still a little bit retrospective, right? Relative to where we are right now, kind of rounding out Q1 of 24. But, when we talk about M&A, if I kind of want to start out, what do people not know? What are veterans in trucking that may not be sitting at those levels? What are some things that, just to kind of level set and give some basic terminology, et cetera, for folks that are, may understand the acronym M&A, what it stands for, but beyond that, especially in trucking, how do you kind of define that, and what are some of the criteria that you look for? And then we can get into some kind of the more headlines and more recent activities, again, based largely predicated on that report you guys put out.
Yeah, no, the way I kind of think about M&A, it's really more of value creation and value protection. And that's really what
Yeah.
we're trying to affect in the process. And so, especially in trucking, in where we had just a relentless increase in the cost to do business, specifically in the last 3 years. I think while we've seen such an not just an uptick in activity, it is a pronounced increase in the participants in the process. So then there's a reason why you see, the last 3 years, companies like Werner, who never did any type of M&A
Pretty
activity,
conservative. Yeah.
very conservative, and
Yeah.
effectively accomplished what they wanted to accomplish through exclusively organic growth activities. But what you see across the board is companies like that, many others, are being forced to reinvent themselves and reimagine the way they think about growth, because not to say that acquisitions is the only way that you can grow, but what I do think is true, if you are limiting yourself to organic growth, you're voluntarily accepting limited profitability because of all the things that you have to offset. So I think that's the main thing, is that when we think about anything, we think about value creation and value protection. Because some folks have to acquire, not just to grow, but just to keep what they've got, to offset some of the things they're having on the bottom line. And so for me, what's exciting as someone doing what we do is that it's been a really inspiring time to see a lot of folks that, you can teach old dogs new tricks. And I've seen a lot of folks using this as license to do a lot of things as it relates to growth that maybe they otherwise would shy away from. And what they're experiencing is that not only are we getting results, we're realizing this is more effective, this is more efficient, and this is fun, right? And this is a fun way to think about creating value and ensuring that we have a successful future. So to me, I think it's exciting. When you do all those ingredients in the same bite, it's very, it's fun, it's exciting, and it's great to participate. It's also great just to cheer folks on throughout the industry doing great things.
Absolutely. And you've been around for a while, like we said earlier, myself as well. What do you think has spawned some of the more activity around M&A versus, in my earlier years, maybe I just didn't have the exposure. I know what was going on, but I've worked at some pretty conservative corporations, and there's always kind of this risk that's always associated, right? No secret there. But in my earlier years, I know there were, and I worked at the C.H. Robinson 3PL firm, and I think that would kind of, there are parallels to some of the asset-based trucking companies in that we touched on that level of just they're conservative by nature. A lot of these larger companies, again, a lot of that's merited and warranted. But we've definitely seen, at least in the last 5 years, I don't ever remember it being as quietly as active. And there's a lot of reasons, right? But
Yeah.
what do you think again has spawned or kind of been the catalyst for trucking in particular to kind of come into the forefront? And again, on the report that I hope folks are able to download, you had kind of called out Werner being among them, but some other fairly significant acquisitions, some Tenney was directly involved with. Do you think it's, is it technology? Is it just the market as a whole? The landscape's changed, the new entrants coming in. Do you think it's just because of the market conditions right now? Right. I think we saw a lot of folks maybe a little more apprehensive to explore M&A because, well, let's be honest, like, cash hand over fist. everything's great, but for those of us that have been in the game, right, it's all cyclical. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, this last uptick, has created a pretty rapid decline. And I think, again, headlines aside, we can all, everyone I speak to at Manifest, I'm getting ready to go to some other conferences like yourself. There's a lot of chatter about we hit the bottom. And so maybe this is how does this impact the mindset and the mentality across M&A as you see it today? And again, kind of in the context of the last, say, 5 years or so.
There's several things that I think that are bigger than just the immediate trade market that might have some influence on the M&A activity. Number one, just bigger graphically, we're in a global phenomenon. So we're the highest percentage of baby boomer business owners retiring, and they don't have
Yeah.
successor. There is a huge shift in not only wealth but just competitive landscape across the whole marketplace, and so that has a lot to do with it, just in terms of the supply of available companies to purchase. And this has been going on for a number of different years, but that has a lot to do with the opportunities in the marketplace to affect
Absolutely.
competitive landscape. Another thing around that is just the growing sophistication. I think people from the outside trucking world, they have an idea about sophistication or lack of trucking. Once you actually get into it, you realize how badly mistaken you are in terms of like how sophisticated the whole logistics system is. And
Yeah.
so I think that, we can go around, this is not your granddaddy's trucking industry. And I think that's has a lot to do with it, because it's the recognition that the industry is progressing so fast, it is impossible to master certain key areas of expertise. And so what we see by today's standpoint is like, there's no time to figure these things out. You'll buy the subject matter expertise or the technology, or in our case, in M&A, people think that, hey, we want to expand our capabilities. We want to bring in the brokerage arm of what we're doing to help us be more agile. Well, like, they don't want to figure that out. They want to go acquire the best possible system operation that does it at the highest level, just because the extent to fail or to underperform is so great. So it doesn't make any sense to still buy the result. And so I mean, those two different elements of those things happening simultaneously have a lot to do with driving. It's not like it's a trend, but it has nothing to do with the free market. Has everything to do with the speed at which we're progressing. It is this natural, mass exit of aging demographic business.
Yeah, and I want to kind of touch on, those are two excellent points. So do you think, you mentioned it's not your granddaddy's trucking company anymore. Do you see that there's more of an inclination for the next generation of leadership and management to, that the age-old question for every organization: do we build it? Do we buy it? Do we create a partnership? Do you think the mindset is shifted away from organizations saying, hey, it's, we can build this. How hard can it be, right? It's a little bit moving away from maybe their traditional core competencies. And do you think the mindset is, as again, newer blood kind of comes into the market and says, look, guys, we need to move fast, scale quickly. There's no way we have the in-house resources or bandwidth or knowledge to even attempt to do that. So let's just go out and find people, other organizations that are complementary in nature, and just consider the M&A alternative. Is that something you're seeing in that regard?
There is a pronounced difference in just the attitude and association with risk around acquisition versus organic growth. But the rising generation of leaders within trucking logistics, the way that they relate to it is entirely different. And so you can see this across the board. You see announcements, you see that what they're doing. Whereas, folks that have been around for generations, then they've been doing this a certain way. There's a natural apprehension about doing something different. And so whereas this rising generation, the way that they relate to it, it's more just like, if we don't do this, we're not going to have a company. So it's like, it's not even a question for them. And so the speed, the attitude about risk, it's almost the inverse. The rising generation feels that if we don't do things fast and big, we don't have a business. And they're not wrong.
Yeah, I agree. I talked to the PE community in the VC world as well, and I'm seeing a trend. I just wanted to kind of get a gut check from you. Of the old days, it was kind of and we'll talk like TMS and system wide solutions that have traditionally been looked at as, hey, we just want to have one login. We want to, be able to operate our entire network through a singular platform. And what I'm seeing now, that was very attractive, right? And from a user experience, it's great. Change management's much easier. The trend I'm seeing now, though, Spencer, is like, I engage with PE, for example, their portfolios, it seems that they're looking instead to find very niche solution providers, and we'll keep it in the context of trucking again, that complement trucking companies and their operational tasks. But they're looking for, again, best in breed and basically trying to create these portfolios of those companies so they, as a PE, can go to the market with all this ammunition, this war chest of, again, best in breed providers. Is that something that a trend that you're noticing? And again, that's more the private equity world, but I'm sure you touched on that quite a bit in your world. So am I right on that, or are you seeing something completely different?
Maybe restate the question one more time. I want to make sure that I'm
Yeah,
tracking with you.
I just wanted to kind of like, again, for context, I think there was a day where a lot of companies looked at whether they were building something in house organically or they were leveraging a third party.
Mhm.
They looked at it as kind of, we can purchase maybe one piece of software, and that'll be kind of the context again. But I'm seeing through the private equity world now of this portfolio creation of best in breed niche providers. So maybe that's visibility, maybe it's back office automation, maybe it's it could be in the insurance world, could be in the optimization world, like what Optym's doing. But that's something that I've been seeing a lot more of versus the old school mentality of there's probably a single provider that can do everything for us. Let's go that route versus what I'm seeing again with the piecemealing of various niche providers and creating that singular portfolio. Is that something, like I said, is that something that are you seeing a
Yeah,
trend of that along those lines?
I get that. It may not be exactly, but here's what I'm observing that I think relates to what you're saying.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
whereas, um, you know, depending on what's happening in the travel market, depending on what's going on in the freight market, there's a direct relation to the profile of the targets that your typical best-in-class acquirers are pursuing. And when you're coming off a market where there is mass exposure around the stock market, what becomes the profile is you don't want a generalist. You want a niche expertise
Yeah.
provider that has the insulation from those type of market swings. So for us, what we're seeing is very large, capable, well-funded partners that have dramatically evolve on their profile. And in this situation, they're actually acquiring much smaller companies than they might have done in the past, specifically because they have direct expertise, it differentiates from the rest of the market, and they're insulated from the trucks are insulated from the spot market and other risks within trucking. And so I think that has a lot to do with what's taking place in the market. But that's your question.
Yeah, appreciate that context around that aspect. And I wanted to kind of also touch in like, trends that you're seeing around what, when you're engaging in M&A activity, what are some of the criteria that you're seeing from your customer base and what they're actually looking for? And maybe in the current market, or they're just kind of planning ahead for when the market turns around. Is there any trends or commonalities that you're seeing across your customer base and when they're thinking about going the M&A route, what they're really looking for? And I know diligence will be a part of that, obviously, but what are some high level macro trends you're seeing today?
I think that there's several things, and this is kind of just table stakes for a lot of folks. But really, what they want, whether it's private equity or private equity backed strategic, the additional things are they want something that has a compelling growth story. I mean, from
Yeah.
the investment standpoint, if it's private equity, their whole expectation is to cut 3 to 4x the return on their invested capital, called 3 to 5 years. And so, like, can this business satisfy that? Yes or no? And so, because I think when a lot of folks, when they realize that they're not just competitive, like the trucking companies are not necessarily just competing with other trucking companies, they're competing against all investment opportunities that
Yeah.
provide competitive return. So I think from a private equity group, like that's just kind of, that's how they're thinking. The next level is they're looking for leadership. People that have
Yeah.
the money don't have a desire to operate a transportation logistics business. What they want to do is enhance something that already has great bones. But they just want to provide their additional capital maybe some sophistication operationally or from in the area of finance. But in order to do that, they have to have a very effective, senior, sophisticated leadership team. So, leadership team. On the financial reporting, I think that's the other part. When they're coming right out and gate, a lot of folks don't realize is when an interested buyer, they want to know that you have reliable documentation, and they're going to assess that with the first request of information. How fast and how reliable is the information? So those are just some basic things just to get in the game. And then the fourth thing was kind of thinking that's what we just talked about, was they want to know that it has some level of niche expertise, insulated from market swings, and they want to, because they don't like the return, but they also want to know that, hey, what are the market risks that could potentially attack that? And so if there's a strong growth story, if there is a strong leadership team in place, if there is impeccable financial documentation, if there is clear differentiation, some niche expertise, that is an excellent start to get engagement from a variety of different type of buyers.
And kind of capitalizing on that last comment there, and again, Tenney's been actively engaged in this space for a while. Going back to the 2023 report, Spencer, what are, can you kind of highlight some of the biggest M&A activity that maybe, and again, maybe it was Tenney was directly involved, indirectly involved, or not at all involved, but based on that list that the report put out, what were some of which ones did you feel were kind of the biggest, maybe surprises, or the ones that maybe you said, hey, that makes sense all along, it was just a matter of time? Anyone on that list? And again, it was pretty exhaustive, but anyone that stands out just based on the report?
Well, one of the ones that I would point out, and we talked about this on the days ago, we reiterate this, is that just to kind of echo the four things that I just pointed out. When you look at the market, you have close to a dozen different interest rate hikes over a very, very short period of time, and you have the freight market free falling. Month over month, it was an absolute horrible market to go get capital from third parties to get asset-light type deals done. Yet, our team was able to engineer this deal with our client proprietary carrier experts, and then the buyers who did capital and tried it and made a strategic investment in the proprietary carrier experts. And the reason that we could get a 9-figure type transaction in place without any assets to collateralize that was because it checked those four boxes. And so that's what I would say is like great leadership team. They had great growth. They had impeccable documentation. And on that last thing, why was it different? Well, they were a market leader and they had almost their entire revenue, pulling out of the greater Minneapolis market, which was to have that level of concentration. Was kind of an unbelievable value difference. No one was in that market. So the takeaway is, from a story standpoint, that even in the worst of markets, both capital and freight, market leaders drive the market. And so if you have a market leader that has that clear differentiation, there's always going to be capital, there's always going to be a buyer. And so I can have the clear stories for us, not just because we did, but I don't do this a long time. I consider that one of the great achievements from getting that done, and based on how the level of difficulty for everybody involved, and because of the environment. So I think that was just a really good example of thinking back on what we just said.
Looking kind of, post M&A, right? I don't know where you actually passed the baton off, but let's say that the ink is starting to dry. I look, Spencer, and think about some of the acquisitions, M&A activity as a whole, and how the success of, and you could look at it from the lens of the acquirer, or the organization being acquired. And there's been some feathers ruffled, if you will, in some of the headlines we've read lately. Do you feel like that there's enough diligence in terms of the cultural meshing that you can't really know fully, but do you have that line of sight to say, hey, there's complementary, whether it's software or it's just a trucking company looking to increase their footprint in another market? Do you find that, though, that after all is said and done, that there's often there's some growth in and the meshing challenges that go along with two potentially very diametrically opposed different cultures. Do you see that that happens? And if so, what is your recommendation for companies looking into M&A that, that may not, they may discount that aspect? And again, in my career, I've seen very traditional companies that may go after a more lean, agile, more forward-thinking, progressive type organization. And often at that, post-acquisition, you start to hear a lot of, on one side or the other, right? You start to hear a lot of rumblings about, well, we're not really clicking. And I think we've seen some mega mergers in trucking that I've even heard so much as to say that it's still a work in progress getting those two organizations to start working together as a singular, organization. Is that something that you encounter as well?
I mean, 100%. And I think that, very rarely when someone practices like, hey, if the culture's not aligned, just walk away.
Yeah.
You don't hear how those people regretting that type of approach to the transaction. Almost never. Because at the end of the day, like you can fix a lot of things. You can't fix culture incompatibility. And the problem with that is because in many cases, especially in large transformational type transactions, much of the whole value thesis or the investment thesis is going to be based on some of these post-transaction synergies. Well, if you have two incompatible cultures, it's very difficult for that integration or effective integration to take place. And so, because it's going to require intense collaboration and cooperation. And so, if you take culture compatibility, that first box, it's just number one, probably going to be the deal. And number two, you need your evaluation thesis. You need to consider that risk as part of it. And so I think that's the main thing. It's one of the most expensive decisions that you can make as part of a transaction. If it's taken out, walk away. And if you can't walk away, you just gotta have it. You need to value this accordingly to capture that risk.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think the interesting thing to me is I think at the executive level, these are where the transactions typically take place in the boardroom, right? What I find the most intriguing is just I wonder how many of these companies are actually, disseminating some of this information down to the front lines and the operations folks, planners, et cetera, the day-to-day execution folks. Those are the ones that seem to kind of be taken by surprise when these announcements are made. And again, there's reasoning for that, right? But at the same token, I find it interesting that it's those are the types of workers that seem to have the most issues in kind of incorporating the new culture. It could be new systems. There's change management across the board, and so yeah, I think that you make a good point. Maybe if you identify that there's oil and water right from day one, that there's a huge amount of risk associated with just the potential for these companies not to really fully integrate as one.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that more companies do that as part of their diligence phase. And again, you know more than I, but glad to hear you reiterate how important that aspect is.
I would add just a little bit as far as that some of this is not necessarily, cultural incompatibility. Some of it's just, it's for post-transaction integration. And
Yeah.
so, and so what I mean by that is the realities around, especially large transactions, that they're based on a lot of theory. And then you do your diligence, but really not until post-transaction and you begin executing on some of that strategy. You realize like, how accurate were your assumptions and your discovery as part of the business. And I think that where the people mitigate risks most effectively is that when it comes to activating and facilitating change within large organizations, that they're really going to get down deep in terms of who's actually doing work. And
Yeah.
they're gonna get dirt input before they start doing wide scale, extremely expensive transformational type change, because it's possible that they weren't involved in the transaction and maybe they see things a little bit different. I think the folks that make large investments and protect those investments make sure before they start instituting wide scale change that the people that are actually doing the work agree with the assessments that are done at the leadership level, and then it gives additional color to help navigate the real change.
Well said. Well said. Spencer, when you look at, again, I wanted to kind of touch on, we often can kind of play Monday morning quarterback in some of these discussions and what could have, should have, would have been done. When you think about here we are and, in the March of 24, what are some of the key trends that you're looking at, going into the rest of this calendar year? And what are some of the, as again, specifically as it regards M&A, anything, and I don't want to say like wild predictions or anything along those lines, although that may be part of the answer, but what do you think going into this, all things considered, right? Market conditions, global economic situation, we got an election year, we got interest rates that, still jury's still out to some extent. What do you think, and again, maybe to make it easier, if you're in a position now where you're an executive at a trucking company and you're thinking maybe it's time to hit the eject button, get out of the game, or the inverse, right? You may be a company like a Werner that you alluded to earlier, some of these other big mega fleets, et cetera, that are now thinking maybe the time is right, as a, where it may not have worked out maybe in the past couple of years, but maybe now the climate's a little more ripe. What are some of those things that you're kind of looking forward to as we progress throughout 2024?
I think what I'm just looking forward to is stability.
Yeah.
I think that the one thing that I would want to emphasize for your audience is that I don't see that in our industry, folks need perfect conditions to go create value, to protect value from M&A. I think more so they just need to understand where they stand. It's a stable environment. And so the fact that we haven't had any interest rate increases in the last 5 to 6 months, the Fed is signaling that we might even have a decrease between March
Yeah.
and May.
Fingers
Um,
crossed. Yeah.
to your point, there is a perception that the freight market has kind of bottomed out, or that where things are enhancing. It might not be the recovery may not be as fast as would be like, but again, as long as we're not having month losses, that's an environment where buyers can get comfortable with the valuation approach and uses. And so I think that's the main trend, is that I think we're heading to a period that is significantly more stable than what we were in 2023, which was an incredibly difficult environment to architect deals. And so, I mean, Chris, we were really getting creative in 2023 to put these deals. and
Understatement. Yeah.
so, so usually what that will do is that it's ultimately going to get license to folks to do what they have intended to do strategically from a growth standpoint or even from an exit standpoint, aggressively, especially I would say from about April on. The rest of this year, I think we will see a wave of transaction announcements across the space.
Yeah, I think that I don't think you're alone in that sentiment. I think that the key is, and I think if you go to some of the headlines and the charts that we look at macro level, you're just seeing that there's still a calibration process or recalibration of, various participants in the market now, asset-based brokers, et cetera, that, obviously did very well a couple of years ago. And many have managed to kind of, hold on to that cash. And again, some went out and bought assets. Some probably saw had a somewhat of a crystal ball awakening of, hey, this won't last forever. So,
Yeah.
do you envision that there's going to be, I don't want to say bloodbath as some have quoted, but do you envision that there's going to be, additional companies, brokers, and asset players that are really just barely getting by right now because of all the other conditions? Do you see that just going to open up a lot and we're seeing it even now, right? Other opportunities for additional acquisitions for some of the larger fleets, to take on those smaller ones that may be struggling, unlike they were before? Or do you see it kind of like, hey, these folks, if they manage their cash flow right, they're gonna hang on, and we won't see this dramatic exodus from the marketplace for the duration of this year, or maybe somewhere in the middle? I just want to get your general take on that.
Yeah, I don't think that the folks leaving it's going to be. I mean, some of it's just fatigue. I think
Yeah.
I think folks, I mean, demographically, there are hundreds of business owners that have full intentions to exit 2020, and
Right. Right.
because of COVID, and then the periods that followed, they have just never been able to get off the ride. And so I think a lot of this has to do with a group of business owners that intended to exit but couldn't.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of seeing that supply that should have entered the market back in 2020. This enters the market and available to purchase now. And I think a lot of it has to do with that. And then the other side of it is, particularly as a lot of folks that, the growth just got hammered this last
Yeah.
year. I think some of those folks will recognize that they're going to need more capital to continue to build. and to attract the type of value. So I think you're going to see a lot of smart and savvy type transactions where people team up, take some of the chips off the table either through recapitalizations with private equity or through strategics, and just find a way to confront the future without taking or assuming all of those risks alone. And I think that the upside about that is that I think that there's going to be some really innovative and thoughtful type M&A because of that. And so I think that what's interesting about this type of time period is when folks are forced to, make decisions, a lot of times that can result in some incredible innovation in the space. And so I'm excited to see what happens. I actually think that this is going to be a period of time where you're going to see more innovation and more creativity than we've seen in a long time.
Again, I'm a pretty technology centric guy myself, so I'm hopeful that you're correct. And they're looking at the theme around consolidation, right? Whether it's in the broker 3PL world, even the asset world. I also see the trend to kind of tie it back into these PE portfolios. Do you think that there's going to be continued consolidation to where we eventually have a much smaller, limited number of these mega providers that effectively own the market? I mean, we see it to somewhat extent now, but do you feel that you're going to see trucking say, hey, we're trucking? At one point, I remember years ago, right, you had to go to the brokers because you didn't really have an in-house brokerage arm. Now of course, that is dramatically shifted with most of these larger fleets having in-house brokerage. But do you also see that they're, going into warehousing, maybe drayage, looking to further expand their own footprints and networks? Do you see that kind of the future look, let's take 5-7 years out, is the new logistics market, trucking market look like these mega providers that offer basically end-to-end service offerings? And again, tie technology into that as well. But do you see that, or do you think trucking is just going to still remain kind of, hey, we're an asset over the road trucking organization. We stick with their bread and butter, or do you think that it'll be survival of the fittest and the cost of doing business with the shipper community becomes, hey, we're really looking to partner with someone that can fill all these voids that we have and provide the capacity and the solutions that go into that as more of a unified singular vendor mindset? Just wanted to hear what you had to say about it. If I'm maybe I'm way off track there, but I figured someone like you at the M&A level would probably be able to kind of have a longer line of sight and horizon to see that.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that are my moving parts here. I do believe in general that the industry is trending towards wide scale consolidation. And it's not because that's what I do; it's because that's what's necessary. Because
Right.
There's no incentive. I mean, like between nuclear verdicts and this the headaches of the industry, there's no incentive to do this unless you can make money and make a lot more money than what you're making right now, because the risks are so cost prohibitive. They're making we're making it less and less attractive for people to continue to invest capital in this space. And so the exciting thing is all of the technological advancements that can affect profitability. The only real way to capitalize on all of the existing, much less what's coming, you need scale. And so, I think that part of what's going to allow that to happen is that you're going to have a wave of a huge demographic of retiring business owners without successors who exit the market. And there will be in filling that void, you're going to have a consolidation into larger companies. But just from a mentality standpoint, there's going to be another level of interest and appetite to integrate AI, all the different things, and to find the right mix of AI and the human tech services to really elevate the profitability of the industry as a whole. And I think when that happens, things will get it's going to be very different, but it's also a very exciting thing to think about in terms of what's coming in this issue.
Spencer, who's doing it right? And whether you want to call them out by name, but you're so ingrained in this space. Is there any companies, maybe one or two that you feel like has really, and again, we're probably thinking of some of the same few in our own heads, but who's kind of a beacon and a kind of a guiding light that you feel like has taken M&A and really made it successful in just about every endeavor they've made? Just it can serve as kind of as an example of how to do it right. Anybody come to mind?
No, I would say there's a couple of organizations on this kind of spotlight. Again, 95% of what we do, we're representing sellers, but it matters when you have experienced buyers at the table. So I would say, key to the advantage, we're back why the group, they have a tremendous approach. I think that is, fair and effective. They do a great job of their whole process, working with sellers. They probably were trying that, of course,
Mm-hmm.
to deal with dual citizens this last year, but they're on and done tremendous work in very different economic and freight markets in the last few years. They still have a great team and an approach that they've been put 12 deals on board in the last 3 years. Um, you know, um,
Awesome.
Within our report, Jeff Faderman over at STG Logistics, I really like but how thoughtful they are in terms of the way that they think about creating value and very thoughtful in their profile and the deals that make sense for them. So I think they did a great job. What they've been doing the last couple of deals, best they ended most recently. And I like how Jeff and their team. I think that they're very disciplined, but they leave room to make a splash where they can. And so, as he said in our our annual report, I think that they're gonna do exactly what I said. They're gonna continue to focus on integration on the recent deals that they've done. Again, like you can acquire all you want, but if you don't integrate successfully, it's not going to matter. So I think that they do a good job of striking that balance between putting the right resources around integration, being disciplined in the profile that they're going to go look at, make sure that it's accretive, but also, working with firms like ours and their existing team to make sure that they have, ears to breadstone about what might surprise them. And so I
Yeah.
think leaving that space is just a kind of key ingredient of doing it well.
Spencer, on kind of the flip side of that, those are all, again, great examples. I couldn't agree more. And I follow a lot of those companies you just alluded to. On the invert side, what keeps you up at night? I know that's cliche, but what is your concern from your vantage point in the industry? What you can't play the what if game forever, but as with all the uncertainty and volatility out there, what are some of the signs that we all need to be aware of and cognizantly thinking about as we kind of go along this calendar year? What are some of the threats that you see that could potentially just basically, put a big dent in some of the momentum that we have right now? Anything in particular? I mean, I'm sure we can put that could be its own conversation probably, but any
Right.
just key bullets that you want to call out for kind of the concerns that you may have today?
I mean, that's like I said. I mean, that's probably a. I mean, we do a whole conference around that very question, probably. But like, I don't know if I think about the business owners themselves, and the thing
Yeah.
that you hear me reiterate all the time, like I think this is great. If you love doing what you're doing and you're creating value, that's awesome. But um, I'm a big person about stewardship, and so like,
Yeah.
I think that the people that are building and protecting business value best is that they view themselves as a steward of their business, not necessarily an owner. And so they manage it differently. And so when they think about risk, um, yes, they may have a strategy that they believe in and they are uh, dedicated to delivering these outcomes and these strategic objectives. But they also stay educated and they stay agile. I say that all the time because the
Yeah.
reality is the market's changing all the time. And if you just get television on one specific path, it can be a significant detriment. It can undermine everything that you created in your business and can affect the people you care about most that probably had a great deal to do with building this like is. And so I want to try to encourage folks to do, like, irrespective of what you think is going to happen, you got to keep agile. You have to keep educated on what's happening. So if you can be prepared as you grow organically, you still need to be educating yourself about things that you can be doing inorganically through acquisition. There's also some certain things that, in terms of I don't know. I'm a big person. Like, control what you can control. You can't control the election. You can't control what's happening in the Middle East. You can't control all these
Right.
other things that certainly can have these. And so I feel like business owners do best for themselves and their people that they serve when they control what they can control. Which, like, you gotta focus on pricing, you gotta focus on profitability, you gotta focus on safety, making sure that you don't have any unforced errors that make your life much harder. And so, you're doing those things and you're thoughtfully expanding your playbook about how you can create value via acquisition or otherwise, those are the things that actually move the needle. And so the rest of the things, I never question the resolve and the toughness of people in our industry. I mean, it's the toughest people, the most resilient people. Like that's if anyone can get themselves out of an issue or a global crisis, it is our peers and friends in this industry. Like that's not me.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so the toughness is unquestioned, and the resolve and the grittiness. I think the real issue is, you know, is being able to adapt to the environment, the times, the sophistication of where the industry is going, and then having tough conversations with yourself about, am I willing to evolve to that degree? Because it's a beautiful industry, but it's also one of the most unforgiving industries on the planet. And so I think that's the real question, is educating yourself about how is the industry changing, what's going to be required of me, and how willing to make those types of changes and protect the profitability of the business. And if I'm not, what am I going to do about it?
Very comprehensive answer. I love how you and I think alike. I think in terms of just controlling what we can't control, and love the theme around the stewardship. And I do see a camaraderie in our industry that, I think as a whole, right, we all see opportunities to elevate our industry as a whole, not just from a selfish, singular vantage point. So that keeps me coming back in this game every year. I've even considered looking into doing something else. I always, to your point, I always see that there's no one, I don't know that there's anyone on the planet has a more gritty and determined mindset than those of us in the space. So
Yeah.
um,
Frustrates you to go in, but then it sucks you back in, doesn't it?
it does every time. It does. I don't know how many people I've talked to in the past and say that exact, verbatim, right? Just
Yeah.
sucks you right back in. So, well, Spencer, I think we're coming up on top of the hour, man. I know you got other things going on, and don't want to hold you back. But any other parting words for those that are tuning in today that maybe how to reach you, obviously, and we talked a little bit about, you represent a lot of the sellers. There's buyers as well, and there's a couple, there's all different minutia, I guess, if you will, involved in some of these transactions. But what any parting thoughts? And again, let people know where they can find you if they have some interest. They may be tuning in, saying, "Hey, I'd like to learn more."
Yeah, I would say number one is control our website and just join our newsletter, which we're pumping out weekly, constantly providing video and white papers around creating value and protecting business value through M&A. And so I think that's just step one. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to talk to us, but I think just getting into that line of communication is going to elevate your mindset about how to be more effective in the future of transportation logistics. And so I think that's number one. Follow me on LinkedIn. I think that's a great way to stay in tune as well. And the other thing is just a reminder as far as what we actually do. So people think that, like, hey, if I call Spencer, I'm gonna like do a reversible path to some of my business. That's not how it works. Really what we see ourselves is we're kind of a clearinghouse. We've been doing this for 50 years. We have an unbelievable network of industry experts. And so if you have a problem, you're concerned about protecting business value, there's a great chance that we have a solution within our network that we can connect you to and show you the connection to how that's going to help you protect business value or create business value so that when you are fully ready to exit, we can go maximize that experience. So that's my encouragement. It's like, if you see our relationship beyond just selling and see connecting to the whole process of creating protecting business value, there's a lot more that we can do for it.
I think that's a great point to talk about the consultative approach versus just assuming it's a binary decision. I think you nailed it. Are you going to be out, Spencer, at any of the other big industry events, conferences, et cetera? Anywhere that people may be attending, whether it's ATA, TCA, TIA? I mean, gosh, the list keeps going on, right? Anyone that
Yes.
you're looking forward to?
So a couple coming up. Will be TCM, which is in Nashville. We are going to be doing a select strategy sessions. Our HQ is in Franklin, which is 15 minutes down the road.
Love it.
For those that are interested in a kind of full-blown strategy session, thinking about value creation protection, we have a few spots for that
Awesome.
week. TCA in Nashville, but we'll also do a leadership symposium in April, and also we're speaking at TIA, our Chief Commercial Officer, Meg Muir. He's going to be representing us there and trying to bring some value through speaking. So, she'll be awesome. You should be awesome, and I'm excited to make that available to the industry.
Well, cool. Well, I will see you in Nashville in just a few weeks here for TCA. So I'm hoping we can shake hands if we haven't done so over the course of the last 25 years. So I'll definitely look out for you and continue to evangelize on behalf of anybody that's kind of just having these thoughts initially, right? That may be owners of various companies. And again, I think that the history and the experience you have within the trucking sector certainly is a differentiating factor. I think a lot of folks are knocking on doors, just going to manifest, right? All that I can assure you, the VC and private equity, all the LPs must be saying, find us some bets, right? So I got that impression at manifest, but I think again, I always point to no matter where these companies sit in terms of just the investment world in general, to say, hey, there's don't look at just size of checks or just M&A, even at M&A, just kind of look at, hey, who are the strategic advisors that understand the trucking game? And they're not, I assure you, as you know, right? They're typically not in Silicon Valley, right? They're right there in Nashville and other areas where trucking is very prevalent. So I will absolutely be sure to continue giving a plug to Tenney and yourself as well, Spencer. And again, appreciate the time today.
Well, thank you, and we will see you in Nash Vegas, sir.